Good morning. Let me express our sincere gratitude for all of us that took the time to make this drive over from Selma. Thank Dr. Oatridge and the staff for being very, very excellent hosts. We're here to have a presentation on the AMP strategic plan that's dealing with the EV economy. That's electric vehicle, the manufacturing of those components that make up the vehicle. Now this is the Alabama Transportation Institute, and the AMP stands for Alabama Mobility and Power Center. And I heard this presentation one time. And if we pay close attention, I'm sure you're going to agree that this trip and this effort was worth your time and sacrifice. And let's be appreciative to Michael and his staff in terms of hosting us. Having said that, let me bring on our master mind behind this great strategy. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce a few people from AMP that are here today. So maybe just stand up quickly, introduce yourself, and say what you do. Start with Kim, who's actually the mastermind of the entire operation.
I'm Mr. Oatridge's assistant, and kind of just help with whatever he needs me to help with.
Hi, I'm Olga Berdieva. I'm in the business intelligence research for
Hey, I'm Mike Malley, and I am the manager for strategic research, proposals, and partnerships. Pleasure to be with you all.
Hello, my name is Renu Tadal. I am a post-development program manager in
Very good. So I'm going to go through a presentation. It'll take about an hour, and at the end we'll leave some time for question and answer. But the Mobility and Power Center, I've been with the university almost exactly a year. August the 2nd of last year was my first day. And it was a partnership that was brought together by three major entities. That's the University of Alabama, Alabama Power, and Mercedes-Benz. They're the first three entities, but not the only three entities. And the real purpose of our center is to do use-inspired research. If we do use-inspired research well, then we will drive economic development opportunities and give us foresight into workforce development needs. Very important that you understand that workforce right now is the hardest thing that industry cannot find. They can find incentives, they can find sites, they can find talent, but they can't find a sufficient workforce to keep them afloat. So a little bit about me, and I hate this slide because I hate talking about myself. I'm Michael Oatridge, but the only person that calls me Michael is my mom. So we'll just go with Mike. And I went to school in Toronto, and as soon as I say out, you're going to go, oh yeah, he's from Toronto. But I've lived in Alabama now for 26, 27 years, somewhere in there. And I can say y'all, I can say all y'all. Is that all y'all? That's the plural possessive of y'all. And my kids still make fun of me for my accent. But I moved here after spending some time in Ohio. I worked in strategic planning in Ohio for a long time. I moved to Japan. I started up the light truck division for Honda Motor Company, and then moved to Alabama after we started up operations, or during startup of operations in 1999 is when I actually came here the first time. Started up that operation at Plant 1, Plant 2. Continued on that role, basically became the Senior Vice President of North American Operations, and also started to do core strategic planning for the light trucks, all of the light truck lines. What I mean by that is Odyssey, Pilot, Ridgeline, MDX, anything that's a truck. In 2021, I got the opportunity to take early retirement because we were in the middle of a recession, and I said yes. And I bought an RV and I left. for about 4 months, and it was fantastic. We traveled around the country, spent some great time with my family, and came back and was asked to go to lunch with Secretary Canfield, Secretary of Commerce, and Greg Barker, who is the president of Economic Development Partnership Alabama. And they asked me if I could help recruit electric car companies into the state. And I said, I can definitely do that, but every car company in the state will hate me because they're having a hard time hiring people as it is. So bringing in more companies is not the right thing to do. So they asked me to expand on an idea that I started at Honda, which is make workforce a little bit more fun. So did anybody go to the World Games that was down in Birmingham? Did you go see Alex while you were down there? Alex was the Alabama experience, and it basically showcased Alabama as a place where you can have a job, you can have a lifestyle, and it really helped people understand what was going on in the state of Alabama, and hopefully created an idea that Alabama is a place people should want to come and work. I did that for about a year, and that entire time I was being recruited into this job. And very honestly, I said no for about 9 months because I still like being retired. But finally, my wife said, "It's all you ever talk about it. You might as well get paid to talk about it." So I said, "Okay, I'll do it," and I started here a year ago. Oops. So I'm going to explain how the U.S. economy works because everybody knows already, but I'll do it anyway. A consumer asks for something, a cell phone. Consumer says, "Hey, I want a cell phone." There's some market research that's done, and they say, "I think we can sell, whatever, 1 million cell phones." That company then builds a factory, starts creating raw materials flow, getting everything in place so that they can build 1 million cell phones a year, and then they start producing cell phones, and we buy them. And if we buy 1 million too, they increase production. If we buy 800,000, they reduce production. That's the way, no matter what product I talk about, has always worked in this economy. It is not at all the way EVs work, not even close. It starts in the middle. Starts in the middle with manufacturers. Manufacturers are building EVs that no one wants. Who here drives an EV? Half EV. This is normal. Almost nobody drives EVs. Out of 10 television commercials about cars that you watch today, how many are about EVs? All of them.
All of them.
Why? Because going back to the first Bush era, CAFE regulations were put in place by the government. CAFE regulations stand for Combined Average Fuel Economy, which means the fleet sales average, and I said sales on purpose, not what they build, what they sell, has to get to 52.5 miles per gallon by 2025. Who here drives a car that gets 52 miles per gallon? Nobody. That's the average. So what they do? Well, Ford made an aluminum pickup truck. Honda started, running on 3 cylinders on a 6-cylinder engine when it turned it on and off. We see rolling resistance. They made the body panels of your car so thin that if you touch it, it dents just by looking at it. You're all laughing, right? It's true. These are all things we did because we had to get to 52.5 miles per gallon, and if we didn't, there's a big stack of fines that come with not being able to sell cars that get 52.5 miles per gallon. So the only solution is to electrify. That's why every car company is spending billions and billions of dollars to change to electrification. They have no choice. Before I left Honda, I negotiated a $700 million expansion to that plant to prepare that plant for electrification. Mercedes-Benz down the street, who's now building about 20% of their products every day are electric, spent $1.1 billion to change that plant over to electrification. The car companies can't go back. They'll be bankrupt. So even if you're not thinking about buying an electric car, at some point you're going to buy an electric car because that's all they'll be. And if you say, that's not for me, you better buy one before there aren't any more available if you're talking about ICE or internal combustion engines. So it's really interesting. All the force is coming from here. It's not coming from customers saying, I want this. We're creating a market by forcing a market on the American people. That makes the EV consumers really, really, really difficult to predict. So this was the help our government gave us in 2018. This was the curve in 2023, right about there. 20% of all cars sold in the United States would be electric. Right now, we're sitting at 5.8% of the 15 million cars that will be sold in 2023 will be electric. 1/4 of what they said. So in 2019, the Department of Energy realized that that prediction was wrong. So they were really nice and they put out a new prediction in 2019 and said out of the 15 million cars sold in the US by 2030, either 320,000 of them will be electric, or 2.2 million will be electric, or 6.8 million will be electric. In other words, they put out a study that says we don't have the slightest clue either. So this is a real mess that we're in, because the car companies have to sell them. We have no idea when customers are going to buy them, but we do know why they're not buying them. You know why you don't have one. Driving range. How am I going to run out of electricity in the middle of the highway? They cost a lot of money, and they do. What about, it takes how long to charge my electric car? I've heard, 15 minutes, I've heard 3 hours, I've heard 2 days. And I don't see a lot of public charging stations around, so where am I going to charge my car? These are all things that you've probably thought of. The good news is, or the bad news right now, an ICE vehicle, the kind of cars you guys buy and are driving, probably drove here. A nice vehicle that costs $50,000, a comparable electric car is $75,000. So yeah, they cost a lot more. But between 2024 and 2028, they'll be about the same price. After 2028, electric cars will be cheaper than normal combustion engines. How about range? Range, when electric cars first came out, they had ranges between 50 and 100 miles. That's what everybody still thinks. I drive an electric car. It has a 404-mile range. I live in Birmingham. I went to a conference in Fairhope, Alabama. I drove to Fairhope. I handed my keys to the guy at the hotel. He charged it for me and gave it back at no charge to me, and I drove home. Range really isn't a problem anymore, but unless you know somebody who has an electric car, you're going to say, well, range is a problem. And more than likely, none of you even know somebody with an electric car, because less than 1% of the population of this state drives an electric car. How about electricity? Electric cars are going to kill the grid, right? How is all this power going to be created to be able to charge all these cars? The reality is the power company has a lot of extra power most of the day. We use a lot of electricity from 4 p.m. till about 10 p.m. when we all go home, turn on our television sets, turn on our air conditioners, turn on our stoves and ovens and cook dinner and do a couple loads of laundry. We're using a whole bunch of electricity. But for most of the day, and especially in the middle of the night, there's all kinds of excess capacity. But a car is nothing more than a battery. Storage solution for electricity. It could actually save the grid, not kill the grid. So, even without prediction models of when people are going to adopt cars, there's been a lot of forecasts about batteries. So this is how much battery storage, a gigawatt of energy is a lot of energy storage. A gigawatt of energy basically is probably enough to run 100 households for about 5 days. So battery storage, like the ones in your cell phones, the ones in your television or remote controls, every kind of battery that you can think of today, in 2020, there's 750 gigawatts of battery storage produced annually in the globe, across the globe. By 2025, that number is expected to be 2,500, and by 2030, that number is expected to be well over 4,000 gigawatts. Here's the bad news. Almost all of it's produced in China, Korea, and Japan. almost none of it is produced in the United States. That's a big problem. It's a big problem, especially since now the government has come out with the IRA, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. So on top of CAFE, they've now said, hey, we'll give an incentive to sell those cars that we're making you produce if you produce cars that have domestic content, including the batteries. So put a US battery in that car and we'll give anybody who wants to buy one $7,500 off the MSRP. There are no companies. So how are they going to do that? So why did I come out of retirement when I could be playing golf or doing something fun right now? Because Alabama is in the bird seed. I forget what I'm looking for. The word I'm looking for. In a great position. There we go. Think about Alabama. We have mining. We have minerals processing. We have pack manufacturing. This is what actually has to go into a vehicle. This is what Mercedes-Benz has. And then when you're driving by Hyundai now, that big building they're building up front, that's a pack manufacturing location. We have electric vehicles, we have stationary storage, we have national defense, we have aviation, and we have recycling. Only thing we don't have is cell manufacturing in this state. We are very, very well positioned to play in a global market in the battery industry. But it gets better. Everybody talks about lithium-ion batteries. There's almost as much graphite in a lithium-ion battery as there is lithium. Almost all the graphite right now comes from all over the place, but mostly from Australia. There's some in the Middle East. There's some in the Russian peninsula. But the largest graphite deposit in North America is in Alabama.
All right.
There you go.
All right.
Pre-World War II, there were 50 active graphite mines in Alabama. Now there's none, but there's 2 about to start up. One of them I was there about 2 weeks ago. They're well on their way. And there's been 3 mines actively looking for graphite. So this becomes almost like a magnet, if you will, for the electric car company. If they have the materials and resources and they have all of these things, this will come. But more importantly, to build this requires a lot of components. Also for universities like this, there's a great opportunity with electric cars. In the past, you know, I worked for Honda for years and I get my hair cut and my hairdresser would say, I drive a Honda, it has 250,000 miles on it and I love it. People tell me that all the time. And I got friends who work at Mercedes-Benz and they tell me that their car is better than the Honda and I say, no, it's not. And I have the same people that work at Hyundai and Toyota Mazda and I say the same thing to them. And they say the same thing back to me because there is a pride and there is a reason that you bought the car you bought. Because you believe that story, right? Well, the reason is because we held R&D really close to our chest. We thought our engines were better than everybody else's. We thought our drivetrain was better than everybody else's. And customers started believing that, and that's why you bought that particular brand of car. The batteries that go in a Mercedes-Benz or a Bugatti or a Hyundai are the same. And the motor that it runs is the same. So we're taking away that competitive advantage. You're not going to buy a car because of the motor that's in it or the batteries in it because they're all the same. You're going to buy a car because of the name brand on it, or you're going to buy that car because there's some status that goes along with it. But what that does is open up research opportunities for R1 universities like this. If we can come up with a better battery than everybody else, we don't sell to one company. We sell to every company in the United States or across the globe. So, I'll do very brief on this slide, but electrification is one of 4 things that are happening in the auto industry right now. There is electrification, which you all understand. There's connectivity, which you're thinking is the Wi-Fi in your car that they're trying to sell you at whatever, 20 bucks a month. That's not what connectivity means. Connectivity means cars talking to cars, cars talking to traffic signals, cars talking to everything under the sun, and then making decisions based off of loading. It happens today. So there is a center on campus today that on game day here, when everybody's leaving, They track how many cars are leaving by tracking cell phone traffic. And they look at how many cell phones are moving, and they change all of the lights so that people can exit game day much quicker. Before this, it took 5 or 6 hours to get everybody out after a game. Now it takes about an hour and 15 minutes. All of this is coming. So there's connected. We know where you are. We don't know your name, but we know what your trajectory is and several other things. And soon we'll probably even know your state of charge. Autonomous driving, that's way out there, right? Where we're gonna have cars that drive themselves. If you go to Phoenix, Arizona right now and download an app called Waymo, you can hail a cab that does not have a driver to take you where you wanna go. It's an Uber with no driver. Look it up, do a check on YouTube. It exists today, already. I don't know if you've seen the ads for Domino's where they're delivering pizza with no driver, and it basically hails you and you walk out. You seen that ad? That guy who's running that lives in Birmingham, Alabama, and runs a business that is located in California. He used to work for Apple. It's shared. The most expensive purchase we make in our lifetime is probably our house. The second most expensive thing is our car. Our house, we use all the time. Our car, we use about 4% of the time. The rest of the time, it's sitting in a parking lot not being used. Shared mobility allows us to change that dynamic and say, hey, I'm gonna use a car when I need it. I'm not gonna use a car when I don't need it. And I'm gonna get the kind of car I want when I need it. In other words, hey, I'm going to the beach, I want a Suburban so I can take a lot of stuff I'll never use when I get there, and then put it back in the car and bring it back. You're laughing, you've done that. I've done that. The reason I bring these things up isn't to say, hey, this is all that's going on, but these things enable electrification. So if you drove an electric car here today and it needed a charge, fine. Drops you off at the front door, it goes and gets the charge. It looks at your schedule, it says, I know you're gonna be in the meeting for an hour and a half, I'll charge up for an hour and a half, I'll come back fully charged, I'll be ready to pick you up. It allows electrification to work a lot easier. Aftermarket, most forgotten part of electric cars. Electric cars, I get asked all the time, people have seen something on their favorite news station and say, I'm not buying an electric car, it catches on fire. I spoke at a conference down in Montgomery about 6 or 8 months ago, and a good friend asked me the question, he goes, do electric cars catch on fire? And if you don't know me, I'm a bit of a smart aleck, so I said, do you know that gasoline catches on fire too? This is making a lot of news, but it's not really different from an ICE vehicle where it is flammable. The difference is, does it burn hotter? Yes. And are people trained on exactly how to put it out yet? No. That's the difference. The difference is that we haven't trained our first responders on how to respond to an electric car fire, but we have trained them how to do that on an ICE vehicle. Chargers. We have to install a lot of chargers, but we don't have very many electricians. So how are we going to install and maintain all these chargers? The bad news is right now, California has the most chargers per capita in the United States. 31% of all of the chargers in California right now don't work. You pull up to it, it'd be like a gas, you know, the plastic bag on the handle of your gas pump. Think about that, 30% of the handles of a gas pump would be covered in a plastic bag. Because there's nobody to maintain them because we haven't trained anybody. It goes back to how we got here, because we got forced into this position. We didn't grow naturally. So we're behind the 8 ball a little bit. Same thing goes with technicians. Trying to find somebody who will work an electric car, which doesn't happen very often because there's no moving parts. But when it does, there's not a lot of trained people. The only thing I have ever done to my electric car is change tires, because I drive too fast, bro. And then even tow truck drivers. I just throw this up as an example. You can't tow an electric car like this because of regenerative braking. If you do, you'll damage the car and possibly cause other issues. It has to be flat towed or put on a dolly. So I just kind of make it a fun point when I see a tow truck driver and I can walk up to him, I say, there was a guy at the Grand Hotel the other day towing a car, and I just walked up to him and started talking to him. I said, how do you do this with electric cars? And he said, the same way I do it to this car. Like, are you stupid? But he has no clue because he hasn't been trained. So this is the number of chargers that we expect growth in the US. This is in thousands of chargers, millions of dollars. And this is 2023, this is the residential chargers, the chargers that exist here, for example, at places of work. And on this campus, there's about 70-ish chargers that are free, by the way. I like that because I drive an electric car, so the University of Alabama pays for my gas. And the ones that go in my garage, like the one I have in my garage, that I don't use very much because I'm cheap, and I come in as empty as I can and fill up while I'm here. And the blue ones are the ones everybody's talking about. Those are those DC fast chargers that charge your car in 15 minutes. I'm going to ask you a question. If you had a gas pump in your garage, how often would you go to the gas station?
No.
Never, right? Unless you're going on a long trip. How often do you go on a long trip?
Not often.
So everybody's talking about this DC fast chargers. That's the ones you're going to use on a fast trip. And they're saying, I'm not buying one until I see them all over the place. But we all go on long trips once or twice a year. 90% of the time, I charge here or at home. I don't charge anywhere else because I don't have to. This is that load I was talking about. So if everybody came home at 4 o'clock and plugged their car in, would it be bad for the grid? Yes, because we also turned on our microwave and our television and everything else all at the same time. So Alabama Power and most states have done something really smart, and they said, if you don't charge your electric car till 9 p.m. at night, and you charge your electric car from 9 p.m. till 5 a.m. at night, we'll lower the rate of electricity for you for your entire house from 9 p.m. till 5 a.m. That's a big deal, right? This is what we're talking about. This is 4 o'clock, this is midnight. This is where that big peak load happens of the electric grid. My car has a 100 kilowatt hour battery. My car alone can run my household for 3 days without ever buying anything from Alabama Power. That's how much power is in the car. Okay? So think about it. It's a big battery. By the time I get home, usually I'm at 80% charge. I can pull the power from my electrical car from 4 p.m. till midnight and then charge it when Alabama Power reduces my rate and save money on my entire house and flatten out this curve without adding any capacity to the grid. Most people don't understand this. It's a big battery. You use the power from the battery when it's expensive to buy power, and you sell the power from the battery when it's cheap to buy power. This brings apart a really interesting dilemma. So now power, I have in my possession. I'm talking a lot of power, enough power to run my house for 3.5 days. It's a lot of power. I control it. Alabama Power doesn't control it, I control it. So I control what I want to do with it. Theoretically, if my power went off in my neighborhood, I live in a cul-de-sac, there's about 10 houses, I could power all of those houses for about 6 hours. So if there's a power outage, I could be really nice and power the entire subdivision. That'd be nice of me, wouldn't it? But if I'm not nice, how do I get money back from those people? I am nice, but she laughed. Here's another one. If you've probably seen these pictures, there's several of them. Enerpac makes one, Tesla makes one, Duracell makes one, which are called battery packs for houses and businesses. So basically you put a battery pack in your house, and basically it's instead of a generator, it's a battery. Same thing, you can buy power when it's cheap and use that power when it's expensive. So my favorite homeless shelter has one of those, let's just say. On the way home, I plug my car in and I give them 50 kilowatts worth of energy. Can I write it off on my taxes? I made a charitable contribution, I bought that power. Or if somebody stopped on the side of the road because they've run out of power, can I give them power and can I charge them for that? See where I'm going? Energy becomes a commodity. And there's this thing called the interchangeable energy economy that's starting to emerge, kind of like Bitcoin did, where energy becomes cash. And how do we trade energy back and forth? Because now we can, for the first time, own enough energy to make a difference. So remember that DC fast charging? That's the one everybody wants to do. I want to treat my car just like my gas car. So I want to drive up to a gas pump, I want to plug it in for 10 minutes, I want to unplug the car and drive away, because that's the way I've always treated my car my entire life. And it's going to be hard for me to break that habit. Until you actually have an electric car and realize you just plug it in your garage or your house or at work and it's always charged. This is the problem that nobody's talking about. If I charged my car using a DC charger, half of the time I charged it, your car would last about 3 years. If you didn't do that and you only charged every once in a while, or never, your car will last, the batteries in your car will last 15 years. If you don't believe me, who's ever plugged their phone into their iPad charger? You've done that, right? Because you want to get charged fast, right? And your phone gets smoking hot, and if you look at that screen that my kids show me, it'll say, hey, it degraded your battery so much. It's not good for your battery. The phone gets hot. It's good for the customer, it's bad for the battery. But if we don't understand how people are going to adopt electric vehicles, remember that was the first thing, we don't understand how they're going to charge electric vehicles, we can't predict when these battery materials are going to come back into the recycled stream. This is where it gets fun. 97% of the critical minerals that go into a battery are 100% recyclable. There's a place in Tuscaloosa called Li-Cycle. A battery from an electric car goes over there, it goes into a big shredder, it shreds, separates the metals and the plastics, and then the black mass, which is all the materials for the battery, that gets directly recycled back into a battery, and it's 100% recyclable. Most people think these batteries go in the garbage. They don't. They're too expensive to go in the garbage. 30% of the cost of an electric car, or more, is the cost of the battery. So we have to play in this market, but we can't predict when they're coming back. So how do we scale up enough recycling facilities to be able to do that at an appropriate time? So I just sent you through a very brief overview of an electric vehicle ecosystem. The ecosystem is made up on this side of the batteries, the battery components, the motors, the software that helps control the charging and discharging the battery, all that kind of stuff. And that ends up in a vehicle, right? So it's a battery that happens to be wrapped around a vehicle. And on this side is that charging. So the grid, the charging systems, the level 1, 2, and 3 charging systems, that interchangeable power economy, the V to G, the V, you're going to hear all this, vehicle to grid, grid to vehicle, all this power moving back and forth. And in the middle here, where the charging and the battery meet, is where the consumer lives, and there is absolutely no policy, there's horrible marketing, and there's absolutely no predictive modeling. And now I'm wondering why I came out of retirement. Because now, I used to call this the electric vehicle ecosystem, I now call it the electric vehicle hot mess. Because that's what it is. So, when I was still with Honda, I went to the battery show, which is the largest battery show in the world. It's in Novi, Michigan, about 7, 8, 9 years ago. There was about 600, 700 people at the show, and it was lackluster to say the least. I went last year. It took me an hour and a half to get there by Uber because of the traffic. There was over 16,000 people registered for the show, and you couldn't get a ticket. Why? If this is such a hot mess, why is everybody talking about EV, and why are you all here? Because of money. It is expected that the battery industry will grow currently from a $50 billion industry. By 2030, it'll turn into a $225 billion with a B dollar industry. Recycling will grow from 4 to 37 billion. Battery management systems, the software that controls those batteries. Ford, this number just changed to $39 billion. and charging will change from 35 billion to 417 billion dollars. That's why everybody wants to come and listen. That's why everybody is saying, how can I get involved? But the problem is that the actual marketplace is a little messed up, but the opportunity isn't going away. So how do we make these two things work together? So we remove the risks of venture capital and business people to enter this market so that they can reap the rewards. So if I look at that $600 billion and say, hey, based off of the growth of the auto industry, this is all level 1, 2, 3, tier level 1, 2, 3 auto industry in the United States. Alabama makes up 8.4% of all auto manufacturing in the United States. And I just said, let's try and keep our status quo. We'll have the same amount of stuff. How much should we expect? It's a big number. $30 to $50 billion in economic development CapEx should be coming into Alabama in the next 10 years. That's why we're here. To do the research that's required to drive that economic investment in the state and to give us foresight into these workforce needs. By creating a robust consortium so we listen well, we have to create a domestic battery industry, which I'll get to in a second. We have to understand how we're going to power all these vehicles, how that interchangeable economy is going to work. But most importantly, we need to forecast, develop, and maintain a skilled and available workforce capable of providing the goods and services required to maintain a healthy and robust economy by leveraging existing workforce entities in the states, train and retrain the workforce to enable this economic growth. It is the linchpin in all of this. So the Alabama Mobility and Power Center is really set up to listen. That's the best way I can describe it. If we listen and we listen well and do the right research. So when I got here, I thought, oh, this will be easy. Let's just work on battery degradation. You know, when you buy your cell phone, it lasts like 6 hours, 7 hours, 10 hours, and then Apple comes out with a new version and now it lasts an hour. All of those things we should be working on. But I can't go to a research scientist and say, hey, can you work on battery degradation? Because they don't know what to work on. One of the big problems with batteries right now is the graphite that goes on a piece of copper has little cracks in it at a microscopic, almost atomic level. If we could figure out how to deposit graphite on top of copper with a perfectly flat surface, we could probably solve a lot of these problems. So, if I go to a research scientist here and say, can you find a way to deposit graphite at an atomic level onto a piece of copper with this surface finish and so on, they'll say, yes, I can. But what they'll do is they'll create a solution that works on a 1x1 square of copper, because they're research scientists. So how do we create a solution through research that fits into the industry, and that is have industry involved in the research? Have industry involved in the research from day one so that we understand exactly what we need to do. What is that breakthrough that'll allow us to be elite in this industry? But when we're doing that, we're also finding out exactly what it takes to manufacture that, which means at the same time, we can create workforce development strategies to support that industry as we're developing the research. So, I was in private industry for most of my career, until the last year actually. So what did I do? I built a business plan. The business plan was 44 pages long and Kim left. And I handed it to Kim and I said, can you please make this make sense? And she said, it's too long, you're using too big of words, so on and so on and so on. So she took it, she got it down to about 13 pages. And the 13 pages, take, do 8 things and do them well. And only 8 things, don't do 20, do 8. The 8 things are, let's be able to forecast when people are going to buy electric cars. It sounds really difficult, right? If gas was $20 a gallon, who here would be looking for an electric car? If gas was 50 cents a gallon, who would be looking for an electric car?
Not me.
If there was chargers everywhere, and you had no concern about finding a charger, would it make you more or less likely to buy an electric car? You see where I'm going? We don't need to forecast the electric car. We need to understand what's going to make you change your mind. So that's what we did. We built a forecasting model that said, hey, let's allow inputs. What's the price of gas? What's the price of EVs? How many charging infrastructure there is? What's the incentives available? Blah, 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 blah. And from that, spit out a curve that says, this is how we believe electric cars will be. We've got that, and I'm not into statistics, but I've been told that 95% R squared is good, so I believe those really smart math people, and that's where we are. We think we have a very good predictive model now, based off of what you need to understand to buy an electric car. The second one is, let's get the right group of people to have those discussions. I don't want to solve a problem and cause 10 more. So, if I just brought, for example, a car company and said, hey, I need to get more range out of the car, well, the answer is, let's take those cells and put them directly into the chassis of the car. I remove all of the weight of the module in the pack and basically add 20% to the range of a vehicle. But it would be impossible to recycle those batteries without destroying the car. So I don't want to do that. I don't want to create a problem by creating a solution. So let's get the right group of people together, from educators to community people to government to industry suppliers to OEMs to people who repair cars, to firefighters, to power companies, and say, let's get together and talk about what it is that we want to work on. 3 and 4 are really important. 3 and 4 are, how are we ever going to enter a battery industry that the United States has never been in? Nobody in this room has ever bought a battery that was built in the United States. All your AA's, AAA's, all those things all come from overseas. All batteries in these things all come from overseas most of the time. So how are we going to compete when we have no skill set to compete? We created the research hub that drives innovation, but really creates a platform for people to learn. In other words, workforce development. But say we did that. Say we built a world-class battery lab, and then we started recruiting, postdoctorates and doctors to work on it, and then we started really understanding what it took to build that industry and get industry involved, and we had all this growth. And say we did that really quick in 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And then we went to the Department of Commerce and said, okay, we're ready for an industry now. Let's start recruiting industry. And then they go out and recruit industry, and they find the sites, and they develop the sites, and they build the sites, and they hire the people, and so on. That takes 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. Now we're 15 years down the road. China didn't wait. They weren't saying, oh, the US is catching up, let's give them a break. That didn't happen. What happened is, they've taken over the market, and we did all that work for nothing. So we are doing 3 and 4 at the same time. We're working with the Department of Commerce, we're working with the Economic Development Association, trying to recruit businesses to the state based off of what we already have and what we are developing to support them. I'll talk about this in a second. The other one is that charging infrastructure. So there are a lot of things that we can just enter into instantly, but there are also problems with charging. What happens when there's a huge hurricane like Katrina and the power grid gets knocked out for days or weeks or months, and we're all driving electric cars? So how can we still charge those cars? We need to do research on DC based, which basically means off the grid charging, which means solar panels or windmills charging battery packs that are attached to chargers that can discharge to a car on an ongoing basis. That doesn't exist today. The battery management systems is basically the software and the control electronics that help mitigate the charging and discharging of batteries to stop it from overheating and those kind of things. Workforce development, in EV policy and regulation. So I'm going to talk about these ones first, which is really the research side. So on campus, this was the first, when I got hired, this is what they promised me, this building over here. And within 3 months, I said, that's really nice, thank you very much, I need another building. And they gave me this building. This building, we're sitting in this round barrel right there. We've renovated these AMP offices, and 4 days ago, what's today? 7 days ago, we got the rest of this space, where we're gonna build a world-class battery lab. Actually, the world-class battery lab. Better battery lab than anyone in the world will have. We are working on funding on this right now, but feel very confident in this, and I'll talk about this in a second. Across campus, there's a 3-story building called SCIB, which is the Smart Communities Innovations Building. On the first floor is where we will have all of that power research. That we'll have a 1.25 megawatt generator, we'll have a microgrid, we'll have solar arrays, we'll have charging and discharging, AC, DC. Basically, all of the research capability to make sure that when you plug your car in, when you buy one, it can be charged and there's not going to be a brownout. Or when the grid is down because there's a hurricane, there's a solution for you to still have mobility. On the second floor, we'll have offices, but you'll see there's not very many offices, there's big open space. That's because we're going to have collaborative meetings, bringing people from industry, government, communities together and saying, what are the problems that we need to solve so that the research that's done in this lab here and this lab here is the right research that serves the industry the best. And on the third floor, I'll talk about in a second, is the National Training Center, which is a really innovative space to make sure that we are at the forefront of what's most important, which is people. All of this requires people to support this industry so that we can really get into that money, those billions of dollars. So this is kind of what it looks like. The building's actually half built, more than half built, 3/4 built. On the back will be this training center. This is where the charging and discharging will be. On the second floor, it'll look like Google, is the best way I can describe it. Really cool, innovative space where people feel confident to say, hey, I don't understand this, or I think we should work on this. And the third floor is this National Training Center, which I will talk about in a second. But that battery lab is really where I spent a lot of time. So it's actually in this building. It's behind us. And like I said, we've only had it for 7 days, so there's not much work done yet. But this building lab will allow us to build out a chemistry lab, cathode, anode, cell, and quality, so that we can build up to 250 cells a day, or about 150 pouch cells. These are the 2 types of batteries that are put in electric cars. The good part is that we can decide what goes into the battery. There are a lot of different battery chemistries out there. I won't bore you with NMC or LFP or lithium phosphate or lithium sulfite. There's a bazillion different batteries. What I do know is some of them I don't want to drive around in. NMC batteries, the C stands for cobalt. Cobalt is 100% sourced in the Congo and almost 100% sourced by children mining in the Congo. I don't want to be part of that economy. So how do we change the battery chemistry to allow us to make sustainable batteries built with resources that are available in the United States instead of places that are very hard to source or controlled by countries that we don't want to do business with? We build a battery lab so that we can build our own batteries. But this is where it gets cool. We can then take these batteries and move them around the corner, and we can then characterize those batteries from 1 atom to a few microns, which is basically less than a half of a strand of hair, and down to 1 atom, while the battery is being charged and discharged. In other words, we can look inside the battery to see exactly what's going on so that we can start to solve problems that are inherent in a battery. Nobody in the world can do this. So we said we should. So we applied for a National Science Foundation grant, and we are in the running to get it. This will be a $44 million endeavor. But honestly, any innovation that comes out of this lab, to me, is a bonus. It's not what I'm really looking for. What I'm really looking for is the skills and knowledge that are required to work in the battery industry. If I build that skills and knowledge, then I now understand who I need to train who has a high school education, who I need to train that has a 2-year education. I need to understand what it is that it's gonna take to run this industry. If I get this know-how, then I really win, because I know how to participate in the global battery industry. Which gets us to workers. We set up this and renew. This is her slide back there. And she made this, and it's brilliant, which is basically, let's set a vision. Let's figure out how many and when we need to train. Let's design strategies to make this come true, and then let's do it. So, why do we do research? I always question that. I think we do research because we can get money from the government. Sometimes that's the right answer. Or we do research because somebody in the industry says, I want you to solve a problem for me, and they don't have money to do it, so they ask the government to help. But unfortunately, this is where it ends most of the time. We do the research and we don't really see what happens. But research gets us knowledge. That knowledge informs us of the skills that are required and allows us to build curriculum that are appropriate for 4-year, 2-year, and high school people. Because you need all of those people to be a productive member of this industry. All of these feed back into the industry partners, which creates this really interesting dynamic where we're all in a win-win-win situation. But how many? Good question. We know there's $50 billion out there. We also know that out of that money, we know how many projects, out of this $46 billion, that represents somewhere between 50 and 65 projects. When I mean projects, that means new industries. Battery manufacturing, cathode, EV, and recycling. Battery manufacturing, that's the one I want, right? Everybody thinks that. It's a $3 billion CapEx minimum investment to get into battery manufacturing. And at least, starting point, 2,600 jobs. In the state of Alabama, there is one site, one, that could possibly even make this happen. So fortunately, this is what everybody says they want. You know, it's kind of like landing Mercedes-Benz or Honda. But what everybody forgets is the Mercedes-Benz and Honda's supply base is way bigger than the big boys themselves. This is where it gets interesting. Cathode manufacturing, the stuff that goes into the battery, $13 to $16 billion, 36 to 44 companies, 4,000 jobs. But you get into manageable numbers, $100 to $400 million of investment per factory, which is a lot of money, but in today's economy, not as much as it used to be. 100 to 200 jobs per factory. Or EV charging, 900 jobs, about 500 million. Or recycling, about 175, 125 jobs. But look how many projects there are. Lots and lots, 50, 60 projects out there. That's where I think we win. And why do I think we win? Let's draw a little triangle. We got Honda in Lincoln, we got Mercedes-Benz in Vance, and we got Hyundai in Montgomery. What's in the middle? Exactly.
Blackbelt.
Blackbelt is perfectly positioned for these type jobs. Not this one. Don't go after the $3 billion. Because I don't think it's the right thing to do. Go after the ones that fit into the communities, and in some ways bring us back to the town that's supported by a factory where, you know, everybody works, but then for every one of those jobs, there's 5 other jobs. The person that works in the grocery store, the person that works in the gas station, not the gas station, there's no more gas stations. You see where I'm going. So there's a huge opportunity. Here's the problem. This is Alabama's, and this is the entire state of Alabama's education and attainment, and this is what those EV companies look like. So for the EV company to operate, this is the makeup of educational attainment that's required to attract that business. They don't match. Is that a problem?
Of course.
No, it's a challenge.
Challenge.
It's a challenge.
That's right.
But once we understand the problem, then we can work on it. If we don't understand the problem, we don't know what to do.
That's right.
We now understand what it needs to be done to attract these. We've got incentives, we've got workforce, we've got sites. We just don't have the right skills to play in this industry. We don't even know what skills they are because we don't have any research. You seeing all this fit together now? So how do we define those strategies? This is a bit of an eye chart. We understand from high schools in the industries they're going into what certifications, what community college programs, what four-year colleges, what grad schools are required. We also understand what K through 12 programs will drive into these types of jobs, and then look at what types of ideas we have to provide the skill sets to get us to that educational attainment. And how are we going to do that? That third floor of the building I talked about a little while ago, that's why I wanted it so bad. The third floor of the building is where all of the rest of it, it's worth it. Because what we can do is we can bring in K through 12. We can bring in AIDT or AWC, the people who really retrain people who are graduating from high school. ACCS, the two-year college systems throughout the state, the four-year college systems throughout the state, and train them on what they need to train their students on to be a productive part of this area. If we do this well, then we end up in a really, really good position where we have the skills, the sites, the incentives, and everything else that the other states don't. Which means those companies, instead of us trying to recruit them, are trying to recruit us. And if we can get there, which I believe we can, then it's a win-win. So this area is now being developed, and I went and I asked the state of Alabama for the money to do this, and they gave me the money to do this. This is fully funded. So we are now in a really good position, and we're doing design on this space right now to be able to participate in the battery industry. So I talked about these initiatives. I didn't talk a lot about EV and policy because honestly I haven't worked a lot on EV and policy yet. Because less than 1% of the population in Alabama drives electric cars. So out of the 8 things I need to work on, it's not the one I need to work on right now. Are we working on it? Yes. Do I have a lot of slides on it? No. But you're probably thinking the same thing I was thinking when we put this together. Whew, that's a lot of work. Count 4 people at the back of the room. How are we going to possibly do this? The way we're possibly going to do this is by sticking together. When I was in this room, actually, I did my interview presentation in this room, I was asked, why do you think this will work in the state of Alabama? And my answer was simple, because we all like each other. It sounds crazy, but it's true. Because once we define a problem in this state, it seems like we can work together to solve it. Once we all are pointed in the same direction. But this problem is too big for one state. We have 5 million people in this state. As you can see, the numbers are, I mean, I was showing $30 to $50 billion. There's $600 billion required out there. So how is this ever going to work? Where is all these people going to go? So right after the national championship, phoned the University of Georgia and said, hey, do you want to work together? That went over well. Now let's phone Mississippi State, because that's where my wife went. And I said, hey, how about we try and get the 3 states to work as one and really start solving these problems, because we can't do all this by ourselves. And they said, we'd love to. And so we said, how are we going to fund this? So we applied for a National Science Foundation Regional Innovation Engine grant in, I don't know, Mike wrote it, back of the room. It's all Mike's fault. And we got it. And now we're in the midst of applying for phase 2, which is $160 million to fund this research and the people to make all this happen. And we feel very confident. Since we've heard about this. Of course, we've got 100 and something companies across these 3 states. Mike doesn't know this, but Georgia Tech has phoned and said, hey, can we join? Tennessee Tech wants to join. University of Tennessee wants to join. And Texas wants to join. We must be doing something right if all these people are saying, hey, can I come play in your sandbox? So we are definitely on the right path. The idea is Magnet will advance the research and commercialization of EV technology solutions for the United States by Southeastern University collaboration. So now, if I say it here and say, hey, the University of Alabama is going to solve all of these problems, you'll go, you know, I believe he really wants to, but there's no way. But if I said, hey, 3 major universities in the Southeast have joined together to solve these problems, you're going, that might just work. So that's exactly why we did this, is trying to now bring this to a Southeastern area solution. I presented this plan at a EV battery conference, and literally the next day I got phone calls from FCAP, which I didn't know existed, which is the Federal Advancement for the Coalition of Batteries, I can't remember. Federal Coalition for the Advancement of Batteries. It's run by Senate Intelligence Committee and DOD and DOE and DOT and every other letter that there is. And they're looking at this as a regional model to replicate in 3 or 4 other places across the United States. So now there'll be 4 of these, or 5 of these, and really then split up the work even further to advance and move more quickly. Because as I said, if we do it slow, we might as well not do it. We have to move fast. So, our job is simple. All we have to do is get industry, academic, and government to work together. Nobody's laughing. Everybody always laughs at this one. Has there ever been a $600 billion carrot with a timeline of 10 years out there that you can remember? Because I can't. That's the big difference, is there's this huge carrot out there saying, hey, we have all this economic development opportunity, this CapEx, we can capture it. And even more important than that, as we electrify, it's not just your cars that are going to be electrified. It's going to be tractor trailers. It's going to be military vehicles. It's going to be airplanes. And does the U.S. government want all of those things controlled by China? The answer is no. So now there's a big willingness to really work together to try and solve these issues. And if we position ourselves correctly, we can be in a very, very lucrative position to move forward and show that we can really transform communities by bringing these industries in and making sure that they have the skills to succeed. And that's why we're here. So like I said, this is all within a year. We're in the midst of hiring staff and moving forward, and we're moving at a very quick pace. And looking forward to it. And that's all I have. Yeah, I didn't think there'd be any questions.
Blackbelt. In your information, I read this thoroughly. And it's not really a hardcore economic development document. You also include a concept of social equity. And that's very relevant to the needs of the black people. When you have a region that once upon a time was the richest in the world based upon the cotton economy. We had the coming of the Jim Crowism, free labor, sharecropping, then the first third of the 20th century, mechanization, and the beginning of loss of the need for labor in terms of the agrarian economy in the Black Belt. And so here comes civil rights movement. And all these workers, these sharecropping plantations, they are displaced. Many migrate up north, try to participate in the industrial economy. But some did not want to leave the South. And they were displaced off of these low-grade agrarian economic systems and put in places like Selma, public housing projects. We know the game, and there never was a situation where this workforce was systematically redeveloped to either participate in the industrial economy or the digital economy, and now the EV economy. And the problem has been is that there hadn't been this social equity component that understood the peculiar needs, that's badge and incidents of slave and Jim Crowism that have impacted the level of poverty in these communities, which now is resulting in crime, violence, murder, mayhem. So I think you indicated to Drano and myself that the idea of finally working to bring equities to the Blackbelt is one of your motivations in terms of either taking a look at the Blackbelt or Appalachia, I think you said. The idea of social equity, which is not so much economic, but it's more humane. Is that a correct assessment?
It's 100% right. And I think that's why I tried to explain that the opportunities lend themselves towards the Black Belt as far as the size, the quantity, all that kind of stuff. But we also have some problems that we have to overcome. And some of those problems are from socioeconomics, and some of them are, you know, a whole bunch of history that we have to overcome. How do we do that? I think we all get that there's this hurdle to overcome, but what is it that we need to do?
That's the second question. And you and I both know we discussed it, and there's a level of defeatism. We get a mediocre plan in Selma, the first thing they're gonna say is that our workforce is terrible. Everybody's defeated, and there's no real effort to meet the challenge. How do we, and you talk about transformational strategies, most of our workforce development institutions, they're transactional. Wallace Community College, good. Little non-profit workforce here and there, good. But they are not transformational. They are not holistic. They are not comprehensive, where every major institution in the community is involved, single focus on meeting this challenge of workforce development. The faith-based institutions, the educational institutions. We have a superintendent of school here on our steering committee. We have the superintendent of schools in the county and the city. Okay, public sector, combining all private sector industry, working together on a single focus workforce development plan with a local Black Belt workforce development entrepreneur and workforce development institute linked with your third floor external strategist coming out of the University of Alabama. Has anything of that nature ever been tried, sir? Or is it feasible or practical?
Has it been tried? I'm going to say probably no. Is it feasible? 100%. And the reason I say that is that I'm still back to, let's define the problem. So you can see, I spent 6-8 months of my first year doing nothing except for saying, what is it that we think we need to do? So even though the economic development plan, I don't have one yet. I have a whole bunch of information that I need to make into an economic development plan, but I also know if I make it, it's gonna be wrong. So that's how we get Secretary Canfield. So I presented this strategy to Secretary Canfield, asking him for somebody from his team to be part of the economic development strategy, which is item number 3. And he told me, and I knew exactly who I wanted on his team, and he told me no. Because he told me no because he said, I'm on your team. So he sees how important this is as well. So I think this is the whole point. And I think understanding and getting everybody on the same page is the starting point. If we all say we're going in the same direction. We understand where we're going. Right now, I think a lot of the strategies are like, hey, we're all going on vacation. I think I'm going to the beach, and you think you're going to the lake, and you think you're going to Europe. We're all going on vacation, but we're not on the same page. That is the purpose of the document that you have in front of you. Do we all want to go there? Is it worth going there? And are we on the same page? Are we all going to get there? How we're getting there? Who's driving the car? Who's driving with each other? We don't have those details yet. That's what has to be developed. That includes K through 12 systems, 2-year systems, 4-year systems, and industry buying in, saying, yes, this is what we need to do, and if we do it well, then we'll win. And then understanding what are the challenges that we have to overcome. Is it childcare? I personally know that some of this has to do with childcare. What is the other things? Is it transportation, so on, so on, so on. And then having strategies to overcome those one by one. When you say people don't show up to work, in my history, people like to work. They like to work when they can't. So how do we make it so that they can't? And the idea of that is that we have to make sure that they can get to and from work safely, they can take care of their family while they're not there safely, and all those other things that are important to them other than just a paycheck. And up till now, the state of Alabama hasn't had to do that because we had more people than we had more jobs. Now we have more jobs than we have people. So the tables have turned.
Let me say to our delegation, that's the purpose of the John Robert Lewis Blackbelt development process. You have to have local, organic, comprehensive community focus linking with external forces. They cannot superimpose this from the top on the local community. You have to have a corresponding activity from the bottom up, neighborhoods, schools, the whole working together. You need a process to do that. And we'll see that if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing on the local level, we can get all kind of support from external forces like University of Alabama, the consortium, to help us with our workforce development problem. But we're gonna have to be responsible and everybody moving on the same page. But we know the racial polarization in Selma. That's gonna have to be challenged. It can't be videos going all over the country of folk from Selma somewhere on the river fighting. Okay? That's not good. So that's why we have to have a delegation of whites and blacks coming to the University of Alabama together. It's very important to reject the polarization and dismiss the dissonance, especially when the real color is not black or white, green, or what color is it? Green. It's green. And that's where we gotta go in Selma, Dallas County. Right, Pastor? Yes, sir. So I just wanted to frame that in terms of what we're doing, and I'm gonna leave it alone, and others can ask questions as well.
You got no blood left in your hands.
Have you all taken a look for your R&D in semiconductor? I work for semiconductor IBM, and what you're trying to do, we did that 50 years ago.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that industry went to China.
I know, but what I'm saying is the application though. What you're trying to do, we did that 50 years ago. And what I'm just saying to you, I would take a look at what we did and what you're talking about, all educational levels. We had a line they called QTEC, quick turnaround time. And that was a BAU line. And on that quick turnaround time, there were all levels of educational staff, from operators with high school or less than high school. And so what I'm saying in the R&D part of it, for the application of working with the batteries and doing the research and development, we did that. And so what I'm just saying that if you all would, take a look at in the semiconductor, and some of that application could be brought over to what you're trying to do in your research.
You're a smart man, and here's why. Because the FCAB is made up of half people from the semiconductor area. So actually, somebody that Renew works with, his name is VJ. He is actually, he worked for Intel for 30 or 40 years, helped develop that strategy.
You see, that's what I used to do.
Yeah. So there's a lot of parallels there, and we can learn from our mistakes too. So
Yeah.
why did that industry leave? It didn't leave because, you know, we didn't have the skills. It left because it was cheaper to do over there, and environmental reasons and so on.
But see, this is the inverse though. See, what happened to IBM ever come, you know what, you see, why would I spend $40,000, I mean, millions of dollars to buy these big rooms of supercomputers when you can buy $40,000 and still do the same thing? So what you're saying, the approach now, it seems to be the reverse, and if we can get into that market and using that semiconductor background and that information for application, then that can create a lot of jobs in the state of Alabama. And also, I saw that you had looked over to the other states. Take a look at UT. I worked there for a while. And because Appalachia and those mines in the northern part of the state of Tennessee, it may have some ore up there something.
Yeah. So that's why
I visited there.
Yeah, Tennessee Tech and University.
Yeah, I visited them too.
Yep. Okay. I think you were first.
Thank you. And being as how you brought up things went to China and other places, I have to admit I thought Bill Clinton was the best president that I'd ever seen until I realized the unintended consequences of NAFTA. In Selma, we had about 8 or 9 in about 1995, 96 manufacturers that left. One of them was the battery plant. We had a battery plant in Selma. I don't know if you knew that or not. I'm sure a lot of people in here knew about the battery plant. New people had relatives that worked at the battery plant. That was a big deal. We had a furniture, Piliad furniture. We had American Fine Wire. Mr. Dave Fulford talked about, and I actually worked there, talked about the semiconductor. There were a couple of semiconductor plants, places that we sent wire to, a lot of different places. Disco Aluminum, the aluminum windows that we sent to globally. Several different, I won't do all those, but anyway, that were casualties of NAFTA that have not come back. And we do have a lot of jobs, a lot of high-tech jobs, good paying jobs, and we have about 5,000 people, as I'm sure that you know, and all of us know, people who commute into Dallas County to work. Most of them are in the county and are at the industrial plant. The jobs that were in Selma or close to Selma that left due to NAFTA and the cheaper overseas markets, they have not, they've just left the big, industrial blighted areas. And I say that to say that we still have, people blame the closure of Craig as our final nail in the coffin. I proffer that NAFTA was really the final nail in our coffin. But anyway, another thing too is we have to do more things like this because we have a problem with all communicating with each other and all getting on the same page. We are all very passionate people about the things we love and the things we love to do. Sometimes it's hard for us to see beyond those things that are important to us. And we all don't agree all the time, but we all need to come together with a mutual respect and understand what's really important to us that we are each passionate about may not always be the most important thing for every perspective, that we all have different perspectives. Another thing that I'm going to end with this, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, there is a little bitty town that's exploding as we speak, Stanford, Tennessee, in West Tennessee, in Brownsville, Tennessee, 2 little bitty towns. And they have recently, both of those mayors are good friends of mine. I went through the Delta Leadership Academy with them, Bill Rawls and Alan Stravinsky. And when we were going through the classes, they were talking about the work that they had been doing and were doing with Ford. and they have landed the Blue Opal. So they'll be doing, they have the plant there, did the electric truck for the lightning truck, but anyway. And it's just, that place is just exploding exponentially. In fact, Stanford is going from a population of about 469 in a day to over 6,000, because the people that came to do the plan. And I would suggest that they, because they, work with the people in Memphis and the people all around in Huntington and Paris, Tennessee, and all that. They know how to do it and have the blueprint with all the folks too. And we have Wilcox County, Camden, Perry, and it's just like they're other worlds, even though we all know everybody. But regionalism is key and important. And I think that we all understand it cerebrally, but we really have to put that in practice. And finally, we all really need, and yes, Mr. Dave Fulford up in northeast Tennessee, they do have mines where they do have all that ore. They've got jewels up there too. I mean, they've got copper and all those precious metals. They certainly do. But we have to have, I don't know if we need to do, Mr. Attorney Selma, I don't know if we need to do committees or whatever.
What was that now?
I don't know if we need to do this, but we do have to have hard conversations.
Yes.
So we can work together and stop
Yes.
keeping things from getting done.
Yes.
Stop quitting other people's projects, because that is happening. There are projects that could be making our area better that are not happening. And we need to be able to get on the same page. And if we're gonna make our area better, we need to understand each other better.
If I don't know, yes, go ahead, I'm not, let the other half.
And that's all.
I'm not, okay.
If I get a new car and I go to the courthouse to get a tag, they want a whole lot more money from me if I'm driving an electric car. And I'm assuming that's because every time you buy gas, there's a lot of money goes to state and to local governments. So how is all this going to, how are we going to get the governments and, I guess, funding for academia?
OGA is the answer. So the question really is around gas tax. So if you buy a gallon of gas at $3 a gallon, about $1 of that is tax. And that tax goes to keeping up the infrastructure of the roads and lights and so on and everything. When I buy my car tag, I pay $200 more than you do, which made my wife really mad, because she said, why is my car cost so much more? And $200, I drive from Birmingham every day. So $200, I would go through a gas tax in like a month probably. So the $200 isn't even close to enough. So the last item, which was number 8, which was policy, which is the one I said I don't need to work on yet. We are actually working, and Oga found it on Friday, so she's got it almost figured out now. But exactly when will this start impacting? So it all comes back to this ability to forecast when people will adopt electric cars. And then now that we have that tool, now we can say, okay, as these are adopting, this is the reduction of gas tax, this is the increase in tag tax, and this is the difference. And then how can we mitigate that through different circumstances? So the chargers on the side of the road, the high-speed fast charging, theoretically, it's just like a gas pump, right? So we could tax those ones at some rate and say, hey, we could tax those. But most of the time, like I said, I'm going to charge at my house, or I'm going to charge here. It's in the big electricity bill, so you can't say that's gas tax. So there's a lot of ideas floating out there. So we have Transportation Research Institute also on this facility. We have one member from that team on our team as well. And those things like mileage based. So as you renew your tag, you'd say, hey, I drove 50,000 miles, and instead of $200, you'd get whatever, a cent a mile or 3 cents a mile or whatever it is. So the people who use the roads pay for the roads, the people who don't use the roads don't pay for the roads. There's all kinds of different solutions, but we have to work through those, and at the end of the day, everybody has to think they're fair. And the problem is, people don't really understand that they're paying a tax when they're paying for the car, when they're paying for gas. And on top of that, people don't really understand electricity at all. So I say often in speeches like this, you know, when we're gathering together, I said, hey, I need to fill out, where's the cheapest place to buy gas? And I'll get 5 different opinions. Is $2.97 over there, is $2.38 over there. Everybody knows, right? And then I say, how much is a kilowatt of energy? And that's the response I get. Nobody knows. So there's a whole bunch of retraining that has to happen before we get to policy so that they can understand whether or not it's fair or not.
I like the idea when you talk about the space in the black belt, and that's across the whole black belt, there's a lot of space. But seem like there is a component called outreach that we need to do in this space leading up to what is happening long-term and short-term. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to listen to your presentation today, and I'm sold on this is the way. But we got to get the whole black belt online with the wave. And some of us need to come to the upper room.
That's right.
The third place and be trained about you in depth. You know, how do we roll this out with the faith-based community? How do we roll this out with those that are underserved? We got to get everybody on the same page as relates to that. And in Alabama and in the black belt, sometimes we leave some folks out. And what I'm saying is that I don't know how we're gonna do it, but we need to get a ground truthing attack going at the ground level. Let's start talking about this. Let's start talking about this to the school system and what have you. Let's don't play with this. You know, we got to get ready for it. And we need to start at the school board level across the black belt. And somebody got to go in there and get on the agenda and make it happen. And so as we think about this, we need a ground truthing, we need an infantry working at the ground level on this.
I agree, and as you can tell, I'm not one to jump in. I'm going to do my research, and then I'll tell you what I think. It might be wrong, but it's going to be what I think. I don't know enough about education systems to be, I know enough to be dangerous. So what we've done is we've brought on 2 full-time Tuscaloosa County school people. We're paying their salary 100%, so that they can start coming up with ideas and saying, I think this is what we're going to do, and then sharing that across other school boards. That's our approach. So those people are on staff right now. They started 2 weeks ago, and that's part of Renew's. We also have a Dr. Fowler, who is a K-12 expert in STEM, and she's helping guide our decision-making along those. So Renew has, I always say, her other job might be solving world hunger, because she's got to figure out how to get all these people to work together, and if we do it well, that's the whole point, then the rewards are huge. If we do it poorly, all this economic development is going somewhere, and it won't be here. So we got to keep, you know, the prize in mind. What is it that we're trying to do, and put aside some of the stuff that stops us from getting there. And I think that's kind of in the theme here. And I think we agree with you, and I think how do we organize, and how do we tell a story, and how do we get people to buy in, and how do we not take their thunder? So you can see how this strategy, I said, I don't want to take over. I could have said, hey, I'm going to train everybody how to be an electrician. Well, why would I do that? Because ACCS already does that. And why do and Ed Castile at AIDT, what? He's already doing it. Let's use his resources. But let's give him the skills to do it well. And I think that's the key point. But we got to do it quickly, but we got to do it correctly. And I think that really requires us to take a giant step backwards every once in a while and say, who is it that I need to engage, because it's not me. And I think that's what we're being very cautious in doing, is making sure that the right people are engaged. So we started locally because it was easy for us. So we talked to Tuscaloosa County Schools, but I know this is not a Tuscaloosa initiative. This is a state, actually, a regional initiative. It makes it easier to move quickly when you just focus on a smaller area first, and then we can expand it. I got time for one more question, maybe.
Well, it seemed, number one, I just wrote down here is a major disruption to the whole, I mean, because I have a friend who sells gas, and he proudly wears a t-shirt that says, consuming fossil fuels is my jam. So, but also, and I see from an educational standpoint, and it seems that within your study, you are creating the nexus of getting this out. So, because I can see workforce development, you just can't, we can't just go to the Dallas County school system and Selma City schools and say, we need to change our curriculum and do this, because then they butt heads with the State Department of Education. So I'm assuming y'all are getting this space covered, because you certainly seem to have a plan. You have a good, a grand idea, but we want to be able to go back to our community and kind of we want to plow the field for you a little bit and get it ready if we can at the local level.
So Lisa has done, I forget which grade, you know which grade, I think it was grade 5 she started with. And she's now we went back and said, okay, what's missing to get people interested in STEM? And then they went and they took the core curriculums and they said, okay, how can we make these two things work? So we're doing it with one grade. And one grade only, and then we'll go and we'll spread that and say, will this work, yes or no, before we try and tackle, 12 grades in this. So there is that component in there, but and she's a very hardworking individual.
Well, I'm glad, don't ask me how to do it.
No, I know how to do it.
Screw up a one-car funeral.
I don't see where it's difficult, Jeff, to challenge the current curriculum if it's not serving the functional needs of people who live in below poverty, infested with crime, with only promise in the future is some ticky-tack tourism economy which will never enrich the black belt on a big basis. There needs to be an alternative that's consistent with the flow of the global and national economy coming to the black belt.
Well,
And growing cotton will not do it.
That's been needed for 35 or 40 years.
Well, at some point, it's gonna have to be challenged. Now, that's the bottom line. And now, most of the people in the black belt are African American. We don't have none of this old cotton money. It's time to produce some new money, some new capital, and spread it so that other people can have a chance to live a middle-class lifestyle. Okay, and if people could meet the challenges in the 20th century of breaking down Jim Crowism, then we can come together and meet this challenge. I think we can. I think we can. And that has to be our attitude. It's not too big.
What's wrong with adding to the curriculum that we already have and matching up the needs that this gentleman just presented with us? And if you start early enough, I'm no scientist, and I certainly don't have any of the knowledge that you do of batteries. And as you pointed out, we had an acid-based battery plant in Selma at one point. So why can't we teach the necessary skill set that they need from K through 12 with high school graduates, at the lowest level, right? And then everything else will take care of itself.
What law to say that we can't?
Nothing.
I don't understand.
State board have to approve
We
it.
have a
state board of education has to approve it.
Yeah, and
But you have political officials in the black belt that work with the Board of Education, just so they can lobby, and these changes should be brought forward if it's important to the economic and survival needs of the state of Alabama in the 21st century. That's what government is all about.
It can be done.
As far as tweaking our institutions. State Board of Education is not ingrained in stone in terms of the current form forever. Is it not?
It is to a degree, because they're the ones that's going to have dollars to high school students and so forth, so they're going to have a big say in what the curriculum will look like.
But the design will of the people cannot influence how you look at these matters?
Yes.
With what skills you need.
How different could it be from STEM? The STEM curriculum is science, technology, engineering, and math.
All the things you're talking about is exactly what we're working on, and me and Renee have discussions about it every single day, trying to find the path of least resistance to get there. I don't disagree with you, but that path might add time. It's one thing we don't have a lot. So we gotta find a way to get there
Quickly.
So Brittany's back there smiling because we've had, everything you guys just said, we've had these conversations already. It's how do we present ourselves in such a way, and so that we understand that we're all after the same thing. At the end of the day, money brings jobs, brings happiness, brings lifestyle. And how do we make sure that that is done equitably across the entire state? And with that, I'm sorry, but I do have to run. I know you guys got a long ride home, so Kim, who actually runs everything, and I said earlier, has made some box lunches in her garage. She didn't make some, she ordered them. They're inside. You've got the strategic plan. There's an email on the back. If you have any more questions, you can shoot an email to that. And I really enjoyed the discussion today. I'm looking forward to many, many more.
Yeah, we'll get back with you.
Trying to give me a good start. I know it's gonna be a long ride today.
Yeah, I think so. Oh my goodness, I mean, anybody who could not embrace it, you know, who wouldn't embrace it? The question is, who would embrace it and why? That's the question is, who would not embrace it and why? That's the question.